Welcome to Deciphering the Code, Learning How to Read a Job Announcement. This class is basically going to be targeted towards the beginning processes of writing a resume, basically understanding that whenever you write any particular resume, it's extremely important to target your resume, and the only way to do that is to be able to understand the actual job announcements that we look at, whether it's civilian or whether it's federal. Each job announcement, they have their own specific keywords. They have their target areas. And for civilian resumes, for federal resumes, they have something slightly different. But whether it be civilian or federal, whatever the case may be, it's all catered towards learning how to tailor your resume every time for this particular case. My name is Lepora Lindsay, and I am a work and family life consultant here at Fleet and Family Services Center at MBK, and I will be your facilitator this morning. And we also have Mr. Johan helping me out as well to help organize this process. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so today we plan on covering a few topics, and hopefully it'll help you to be able to understand the requirements for whenever you are looking at different types of job announcements. One of the main things that a lot of people tend to overlook are the job requirements that are required for each specific job. So we'll be covering that today. We're also going to be covering how to read and follow the directions when applying to new positions. And it may be something that sounds, a little bit simple. Okay, yeah, I know how to, read and follow directions. However, a lot of times different types of job announcements have directions where if you do not read it carefully, you could easily miss a step in completing or not completing something which is required. For instance, some particular positions, they say do not submit any materials that we do not ask for. And if you submit those materials, then you will automatically be debunked from the candidate pool. So we're going to cover items such as that. We're going to identify what are known as key elements when you are applying to civilian jobs, and then identify key elements when applying to federal jobs, because they are vastly different. And then after we cover all of those things, we will be covering how to apply what we've learned today into your resume. And if you have any questions, you can feel free just to type it in the chat box. And if I don't answer it immediately, I will answer it before the end of the session. And also at the end of the session, there will be a survey that we would love for you all to fill out. And this is basically so that we will know how we need to improve the webinar or the presentation of this particular topic. So we're going to move on to our next slide here. So the location of the job postings. This particular is to consider. The reason why we wanted to consider the location of the job posting is that if you have one particular job that is posted on, let's say, Indeed.com, and then it's also posted on Career Builder, and then it's also posted on Monster.com, you have to realize that that job is being seen by hundreds, if not thousands of individuals within an allotted time. And that brings us to our next point, which is consider how many people have access to the posting. It's one of those things where looking at the amount of time that a job has been posted and looking at where the job is posted. So if a job is only posted on, let's say, a state government site, and that's the only site that it's posted on, and it's posted for a minimum amount of time, as in maybe a couple of days or a week, what that means is that the amount of people that see it will be few, but it also means that usually the people that apply for those jobs are going to be individuals who are more so at the extreme levels of either being qualified or individuals who are just putting something together. And you definitely don't want to be in that group of putting something together just at the last minute to meet that deadline. So you want to consider, hey, has this job been posted for several months? Where if it is, then something you may want to ask is, okay, if it's been posted for several months, does that mean that they are still looking for applicants? Or if it's been posted for several months, does that mean that there are thousands of applicants that are already in that applicant pool? So that's just one of those things to consider as far as the job closing date. If it's one of those where it's a continuous, then yes, there will be thousands of applicants applying for those jobs, and getting those phone calls or getting those emails back in return may be slightly less than applying for a job that's only posted in one particular location for a minimum amount of time. There will usually be less applicants. So if you're looking at your chances of getting your resume seen by actual human eyes, that is one thing that you definitely want to consider before you even begin to start targeting your resume, is figuring out whether or not that resume will be seen by human eyes. So moving on to the next is the language or lingo of the job announcement. So one of the things that you need to do is you need to look closely at the words used to describe the jobs. And this is, if there are only a few words, usually indicating the high need of employment, more words could possibly indicate a higher preference or more time. So what I mean by that is, look at the actual job title that they're using to describe the words. For instance, if they use a administrative assistant, level 1, or is it an executive administrative assistant? That right there, from the job title alone, provides you with information on the level of experience without you needing to read through the particular job announcement. I've even seen job announcements where they're saying looking for an experienced administrative assistant in the job position title. And they usually are using those languages, or they're using that lingo to target a particular audience. Because when we write our resumes, yes, we're trying to target particular companies. We're trying to target HR to get them to read our resumes. But on the flip side, when HR is writing up those job announcements, they are also attempting to target a certain population who they feel will be best qualified for that particular position. The templates usually contain standard language for the most part, and so it's very important to understand the industry that you are applying into in the particular job. And one of the best ways to do that is that if you're looking at a particular job that you want to apply for, I started with administrative assistant on this example, so I'll stick with it. If you see that, hey, oh man, I want to apply for this administrative assistant position, then what you can do is you can look at several different other administrative assistant positions to see what is the language that they use to describe the tasks of administrative assistant. And it's also very important that the industries are similar. As we know, administrative assistants could work in healthcare industry, they could work in education, they could work in construction, they could work in just about any industry. So it's also important to be able to identify the industry that you would like to work in, because identifying that industry, having a vast knowledge of the actual job position and what the language is used to describe that position will help you to better understand that when you're using those words on your resume, you want to be able to speak the language of that industry, and you want to be able to speak the language of that particular position, and then you also want to be able to speak the language of that particular company, because hello can be said in multiple languages. However, you want to make sure that how you say hello is where that company understands, that industry understands, and that position title, the individuals that are, the HR individuals that are reading your resume, you want to make sure that they understand that the tasks that you are completing are the tasks that they are requiring. So you really need to stay away from implying anything. If you completed a task administratively, you need to outright say that you've completed it administratively, but making sure that you use the language that is used in the job announcement. And in a little while, we will look at some particular examples of that, but I just wanted to go ahead and throw that out now. Okay, so another thing to consider when looking at job announcements and learning how to decipher them, you have to look at the placement of keywords and phrases. And so what am I saying when I say keywords and phrases? You know, a lot of times you hear, yeah, you have to look at the target words, the target words. And the best way to identify them is to look for them in placement. So one of the first ways is frequency. For every job announcement, words are listed multiple times. For instance, if you are looking for a job as a career development coach, you may see career listed several times throughout the job announcement, or you may see developing, developed, development listed several times throughout the job announcement. And those are when it needs to trigger something in you saying, hey, this particular word has been listed several different times within the job announcement. And the best way to handle that is that as you're reading the job announcement is just to create a list of words that you see multiple times. So if you see career listed 10 times, you know, write out the word career. How many times is it listed in the job announcement? If you see the word development or any root of the word developed, write out developed and how many times have you seen that word. And you would need to go through the entire job announcement and identify and quantify how many times you have seen it. And that is simply because if you're seeing something consistently, it means that it is of some type of importance to the particular HR professional, meaning it should be of importance to you. And this is why when writing resumes, it's not one of those things where we can just continue to submit multiple resumes to multiple companies without tailoring it, because unless it's the exact same job announcement with the exact same company, then there may be a difference in the frequency of words that are listed in the job announcement. So that's something that we need to look at. Excuse me. So another item when it comes to the placement of keywords and phrases is the order. The order in which words are listed are significantly important in how you order your words on your resume. For instance, if you are looking for a job as a master plumber, and the job announcement, one of the first thing it says is, you know, master plumber, and you're a master plumber, so you meet those qualifications, then you definitely want to make sure that that is one of the first things that is listed and seen on your resume, because it's as I said before, it is of importance to who has ever written that job announcement. The job title if they're wanting a master plumber, your resume should outright state, hey, I am a master plumber and this meets my qualifications for completing this particular task with this company. So one way to do that is that oftentimes for the applicant tracking system, a good key is that after writing your name, if you actually meet that qualification, if you actually are an administrative assistant, or if you actually are a master plumber, then it doesn't hurt to have that branding title following or underneath your name early on, because number one, the applicant tracking system is going to pick it up immediately, and then you've already had the exact phrase or the exact word listed at least one time. And then you will find ways throughout your resume to incorporate that word or incorporate that phrase. And with these phrases and words, they're not necessarily something that has to be listed in the exact order of the phrase, but you'll definitely need to have that order listed at least once if you can, if it is applicable to you. And then, of course, the frequency should also kind of match the frequency of what the job announcement says. And it doesn't have to be exact. So, for instance, if administrative assistant, if administrative assistant is listed 10 times, you don't have to have administrative assistant listed 10 times in your resume. But what you can do is, say that you completed administrative task, or that you were in charge of administration, that you administrated exams, whatever it is that you have done that utilizes that root word, that's what you want to stick with. And if at any time I'm confusing anyone, please just feel free to type a question in the chat box for me, and I will be sure to clarify and or answer that question as soon as possible. So moving on to the job title. We briefly talked about this before. A job title, it can be indicative of the level of responsibility. And I mentioned that before when we were talking about the administrative assistant position versus an executive administrative assistant position. It could or could not be labeled with a supervisory roles and duties in mind. If so, they may be looking for, the individuals writing that job announcement may be looking for someone who can carry out that task. And this is one of those self-checks that you have to do before even beginning to write your resume, is deciphering simply from the job title. Okay, is this something that is asking for a little bit more of responsibilities and duties, or is this something on the lesser side? And whether it be more or less, is it something that I am okay with completing? So that's just something to consider. Okay, so now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of sections in a job post. And this first portion is basically for all job postings. So this is whether it is civilian or federal resumes. These are sections that are located in a job post. So the first is the closing date. One of the first things that you need to consider is, when does the actual job close? I have so many people who say, hey, I want to apply for this job. And my first question is, when does it close? Oh, it closed tomorrow. Oh, well, if you don't have enough time to actually tailor your resume to that particular job, then you may want to consider whether or not you're going to apply for that position, because you want to put time and effort into writing a resume where it's just not something that's put together. As I said, unless it's one of those jobs where it's the same company at the same place for the same announcement, then you may want to consider it. But other than that, you definitely want to take your time, examine the closing date, and see if it's something that you're interested in. With the closing date, you also want to examine the opening date. How long has the announcement been out? That's just something that you would want to think about in the meantime. Next is minimum qualifications. Minimum qualifications, I would consider them to be requirements of the job, because it is something that is specialized for that particular job. I will mention for federal jobs, they have a requirements section, and this is basically saying if you completed these tasks, if you've done this, then you would be qualified to complete. Usually they'll have an example of 1 year of specialized experience at a lower grade. If you don't have that 1 year of specialized experience, and that's the only requirement that they have, then you may not be able to pass the first rounds of applicants because you don't meet the minimum qualifications, which is different than the preferred qualifications. And preferred qualifications, they are not requirements. It is simply a preference on behalf of the hiring manager that has provided it to the HR office saying, hey, you know, this is the required, this is what I need at a minimum, but I really would like someone who has these additional characteristics and attributes. So don't let the preferred qualifications deter you. You can definitely apply if the preferred qualifications aren't something that you meet, but you want to stick as closely as possible to the minimum qualifications to ensure that you're able to not waste your time and apply for a job that you are qualified for. In the civilian world, when it comes to minimum qualifications, another thing to consider is the part-time and full-time. So it's one of those, I guess, exceptions to the rule. If there is a minimum qualification, say for a particular degree, if you are working on that degree, then you may be able to still meet those minimum qualifications, because while you don't already have it attained, if you're in the process or if you're a few credits away, then that could be a possibility. So there's definitely more leverage when it comes to applying for civilian jobs versus when you are applying for federal jobs. It never hurts to ask for clarification when you are talking or when you're really interested in a position, calling the HR office and asking what they're saying, because there have been times when I have seen jobs posted and, you know, I'll call for an individual and they'll say, well, you know, these are the minimum qualifications, or it could be something similar, like if they say social sciences, but if you have something in behavioral sciences, which could also, while they're not the same, they are very similar. So it's just one of those things where when it comes to civilian, you may be able to have a little bit of some wiggle room when it comes to minimum qualifications versus federal. So our next is the job duties. For this, you're going to review the section to see a list of responsibilities. If you haven't performed some of those duties, or if they sound unfamiliar to you, you may not necessarily be the best candidate for the job. It doesn't mean that you won't get the job. And what I mean by not the best candidate is if they are completing on the job training or if they are not completing on the job training. That is definitely something that you want to consider. If it's an industry that you're not familiar with, let's say billing and coding within the healthcare industry, and it starts it off as saying, you know, a clerical work, but then one of the tasks is billing and coding. If you're not familiar with billing and coding, the job doesn't require minimum qualifications, then that's one of those personal questions where you'll have to see if you would be able to pick it up soon enough, if that's something that you're interested in, because the job duties are basically just giving you a little bit of insight into what your daily tasks would consist of. So you want to make sure that either you've done it in the past, but if you haven't done it, are you willing to do it in the future? So that's one way to consider your the job duties for part of a job posting. How to apply. So at the beginning of this webinar, I mentioned that we would learn, you know, what to do and what not to do, making sure that we follow the basic directions in order to be able to make it to the pool of candidates who have their resumes reviewed instead of getting it taken out immediately. Most job announcements are pretty clear, whether they say you can apply via email, you can apply in person, or snail mail, or use an application. It is extremely important that you apply for the job as the site has requested. Not applying correctly could eliminate you or cause for grounds of disqualification because you did not follow the direction. I've seen sites where they tell you to attach or attach a resume. They ask you to upload an application, and then they ask for transcripts. That's it. That's all they want. If you submit a letter of recommendation, you're getting taken out of that pool. If you submit a cover letter, you're getting taken out of that pool. So it's really important to not only read the documents that they are requiring, but it's also important to look at what do they not want. Did they say that you could upload optional documents, or are they solely looking for the documents that they have requested? So when you get to the how to apply section, please pay careful attention to that. When it comes to federal resumes, it is very important that if you are applying for a job and attempting to get preference, whether it be spousal preference or veterans preference, that you make sure that you have the proper documents uploaded into USA Jobs. So for government jobs, if you're applying, for spouse preference, if you don't have that marriage certificate and those PCS orders uploaded, then you're simply just checking a box, but when they're looking for that documentation to support it, they don't have it. And it's the same thing for military service members. If you're, claiming that veteran's preference, if you don't have that DD-214 or that statement of service, or if you're claiming a certain level of disability and you don't have that that VA claims disability letter, then it has your preference has not been supported. So it's extremely important to make sure that when you are applying and you're checking those boxes, that you have that listed on there, so that way it's not, oh, well, they said that they have veteran preference, but I'm looking here and I don't see the documentation. So something else to consider for government only is the series number. On USA Jobs, for every job that is listed, whether it is a GS position, a WG, a WL, whatever type of federal employment it is usually followed by a series number. That series number determines the type of work that is to be completed. For instance, the 1700 series usually are for education. 1702 is usually an educational aid. Your 1720 is usually a educational assistant. So that's the 1700s is for education. The 000s are usually the miscellaneous series. So you'll have usually the work and family life consultants are listed as a 0101. The 0083s are usually security administration. But basically, before you apply, you need to understand what series number you would like, because as I mentioned before about understanding the language, consider a series an industry. Each of those series numbers have a specific set of terminology that no matter what job you're applying for, the terminology will usually be listed, even if it's security administration working at a hospital. The terminology is generally the same. So it's important to understand that. If you have no clue about what a series number is, you can access that on the OPM site, which is the Office of Personnel Management. They have a list of the different types of federal series numbers, and for each one, they usually have a PDF document where you can read and understand this is what a GS4 is in this particular series. These are the things that they are usually qualified for on a general basis, and then so on and so forth. So please try to familiarize yourself with that just to better understand the series numbers, and then we'll talk briefly about the questionnaire. So in the past, USA Jobs, it was told that when you apply to USA Jobs, you know, you got to hit those keywords. You got to put them in there, put in those keywords. They have to be in there. And it's not that that's necessarily changed, but it has. That's not the focus. The focus is now on the questionnaires. And for the questionnaires, the focus is based on answering those questions and providing support, not only there in the questionnaire, but it's also based on providing support in your actual resume. So if you're saying that, you know, you have completed the task with little supervision, then that needs to be displayed in your resume. And it's one of those things, again, where it's not, don't imply it. You have to outright state that, hey, this is how I was able to complete this task with minimal supervision. And we're going to look a little bit closer at the series numbers and the questionnaires briefly. And let's take a closer look. And we're going to start specifically with the federal. Okay, so this is just an example here of what federal positions look like on USA Jobs. And this is just to kind of help you understand what you're looking at when you're actually on the site. So this particular site is telling us, as I mentioned before, it closes in 7 days. And try to ignore the date that it's 2016. But if today was that date and it's 7 days away, you know, are you able to apply? And the thing about that is it's 7 days away, but remember that it's always based off of Eastern time, not Pacific time. So we are 3 hours behind. So when it closes at 11:59, we know that's more like 9:59 or 8:59, sorry. So that's just something to consider. The next thing, location. Where is the location of the job? People apply for jobs and they don't realize that the location is across the ocean instead of right down the street. So making sure that the location is something that you can meet, or that if it is across the ocean, that they are paying for to get your items moved, because sometimes they do not pay for that. Sometimes that is something that you'll have to pay on your own. But you also want to make sure that in your preferences, when you create your profile, that you have selected that you are willing to work in those particular areas. So basically everything has to line up. If you're saying that, hey, I can work in Japan, making sure that in your profile under your choice preferences that Japan is also selected there. So that way it's not a discrepancy between your profile and the type of job that you are applying for. And this is what I was talking about before in regards to the series number. So you see here the first two letters are TP, and then immediately following that are the numbers 1750. And as I mentioned before, that is the 1700 series in general is the educational series. So we see here that is an educational technologist. So if you look at the 1700 series, you'll get a list of different terminologies that are used that can be really beneficial in just kind of the starting phases of writing your resume. Who may apply? So you want to make sure that you're actually able to take the time to work on a federal resume. Federal resumes are extremely extensive. So you don't want to work on a resume and then come to find out you are not able to use your spouse preference, or you're not able to use your veterans preference, which is very rare that you wouldn't be able to. But that's just something to consider. But for this particular one, you see it says U.S. citizens and status candidates. So that's something that you, hey, okay, then I have a chance to apply for that job. But sometimes you'll see particular positions that say only open to current federal employees, or open only for military spouse preference, or only open to those who have the Veterans Recruitment Act or the VEOA. So you want to make sure that that section that says who may apply, that you are able and willing to apply for that position, so that you don't waste your time applying for a position when you're not going to be able to basically complete the task. Okay, so this is our next section of the USA Jobs, and this is actually scrolling down on USA Jobs. This is what this section looks like. So if you see, I have underlined at the very bottom where it says Preview Applicant Questionnaire. That is the questionnaire that I mentioned before, and that is your best friend when it comes to tailoring your resume towards for federal resumes for this particular position. You want to make sure that it's something that fits. Usually it's located in this section that says how will you be evaluated, or required documents. Clicking that link, you'll come into several different questions that usually have letters listed A through E that are basically asking, hey, have you completed this task? If so, have you completed it with supervision? Have you completed it with little supervision? Or are you an expert? You'll have to answer that, and then you'll have to provide, as I mentioned before, support behind why you believe that you have completed it in that particular area. Job requirements, as I mentioned before. So as you see, these job requirements, they can also be mentioned as minimum qualifications. So it's one of those things where it has to be done in order to be able to get that job. Now, as I said before, when it comes to federal, questionnaires are number one, but the requirements are something that the task is also asking you to do. They usually line up, but it's a really good opportunity to be able to get a sense in both of those rather than just one. So now we're going to take a closer look at the civilian resumes. So this is a civilian job announcement. And basically what this is an opportunity for you to take a look and to see what I was mentioning before in regards to job title and what it is that they're looking for. So working title is a career coach. And it's one of those things where if you're writing your resume and you're going based off of frequency and order, we see that, okay, frequency, and well, the order is career coach, most certainly. And this is not a faculty position, but this is a staff position. So depending on the company, that is something that you may want to consider. If you're looking for a staff position, or if you're looking for a faculty position, what are some of the benefits? What are some of the disadvantages? Okay, so I specifically did not highlight any type of reds or anything here because I really wanted to use this as almost a little activity just to see what words jumped out at you between as being, when we talked about frequency and order, what words do you see that tend to pop out as being most important? And also for you to get a better sense of when I talked about preferred qualifications and required qualifications, being able to decipher between the two differences. As I said before, when it comes to preferred, it does not mean that you do not have the opportunity to get the job. It's simply one of those things where the hiring managers are specifically stating, hey, you know, this is what we would like, but well, this is what we would like in addition to meeting the minimum qualifications. But it doesn't mean that you don't have a chance at all. It's just one of those things where they have a preference and they're stating that preference. And it's just good as an applicant to be able to have that heads up in what their preference is. Okay. So how to apply this? And this is basically the summary behind everything that we talked about today. How can we take these steps home and tailor our resumes after we read a job announcement? So when we're talking about adding skills on a resume, when it comes to a federal, you need to answer the question as a subject matter expert. Think about all the different tasks that you have completed and figure out whether or not that is applicable to those questions on the questionnaire. When it comes to ordering in the federal or civilian, you need to make sure that you determine the frequency and the order. How often are words listed on a federal or civilian resume? In what order are they listed? Because those are things, as I said before, they're important to the hiring manager. So therefore, they should be important to you by how you list them. Showcase that you have researched. We talked about before about understanding the industry, understanding the company, understanding the position. You showcase that research by using that language, by using that lingo, by understanding that the items that are listed in the job duties and responsibilities, you have displayed that, not implied it, but outright displayed how you were able to accomplish that. For the target, and then you're going to target the job announcement. Basically, what are they saying? What do they consider to be one of the most important aspects of that job? And then kind of going back with the showcasing research, what are their missions? What are their values? Are there ways that you can implement that into your actual resume and not just your cover letter? All right, so now we're going to open the floor for any questions. If you all have any at this time, you can feel free, which I don't think anyone has any questions. So at this time, I'll give you all, if you need any additional assistance and support, you can feel free to call this number to schedule an appointment. The number is 1-866-854-0638. And in some additional sources, there is ONET, WorkSource, and Career One Stop. For additional assistance with basically understanding job announcements, understanding the federal application process, and understanding the civilian process. I really hope that this webinar today was beneficial to you. As I said before, at the end of this, we will have a survey that will be sent out. And if you can please just take the time to fill that out, provide us with some constructive criticism so that way we can work on improving this for you.